So we're now on page 12. At the top of page 12, you see the words generating the visualization. That is, in fact, what this section is about. So, I'm going to, in the explanation, phrase it like this. You are sitting here, and you need to imagine that in front of you is a vast array of sentient beings. Sentient beings, sometimes we make the mistake of thinking human beings. Not all sentient beings are human beings. Sentient is something, I think even if you look in the dictionary, it'll say with a mind. It has to do with having a mind, not a brain, a mind. You're stuck with your mind. You get a new brain from now, from time to time. So you imagine, and a number of things are in this, so if you'll bear with me a moment. You imagine in front of you a vast array of sentient beings. That is to say, all living things, small and large, and we tend to focus on human beings, which is okay, at least for starters, as long as you also imagine that it references all sentient beings, not just human beings. Because Chenrezig is a practice of compassion, I will say, apparently, primarily, but not really. And we'll get to that a little later. But I think it's nice for you to have something to remember that you don't know what it is yet. So we imagine in front of us all sentient beings like a huge galactic cloud, just extending to the very limits of space itself. A cloud of sentient beings, human beings, large and small, what to speak of races and genders and all of these things. This is a cloud of absolute diversity. There are no two alike. And it exceeds our ability to imagine it, of course, because these beings are uncountable. No matter how many zeros you put after the number, it's still too small. And Chenrezig, like what we said about the Buddha, that we are all Buddhas. Not having recognized ourselves, we are sentient beings as opposed to Buddhas. So all of these beings, Chenrezig has a task, a job description, if you will. And that also is your job description, which is essentially to bring all of these beings to complete fruition, recognizing the nature of mind itself. Now, you might think that probably Chenrezig is up to the task, but I'm not. You have to put the probability that you can do it or not do it aside. It's actually not relevant. You have to make first the aspiration. How amazing it would be if I could do this. If I actually thought I could do it, I'd take a shot at it. You have to put that aside and give rise not just to the aspiration, but actually it needs to be like a pancake cooking. You have to turn it at some point. You have to turn this aspiration at some point into a hard commitment. Not just that I hold the aspiration, that's nice. It has to be a commitment. But still, even with that commitment, as large as the odds are that you will utterly fail, the commitment is the path. The success has nothing to do with it. The commitment is the path. There's a story that I heard recently. It sounded true. I think it is actually accurate. So I'm going to tell it, even though I can't personally verify that this is correct. Seems correct. And I've heard pieces of it before. There was, in the 19th century, a great Lama, a great teacher, whose name was Conklin. And the prediction for Conklin, who was a great meditator and teacher, was that he would become the 1000th Buddha in this era. So don't think era as something small, it's big. He would become the 1000th Buddha. Buddha Shakyamuni, the way I heard it was, he was the 4th Buddha. So we often think the Buddha Shakyamuni was the first Buddha. And maybe in some traditions he's considered the first. But anyway, in this particular story, he's the 4th. Sure, he doesn't mind. He was the 4th Buddha. And Jungwon Kongtrul would become the 1000th Buddha. Now, here's the thing about that system. The 1000th Buddha has a commitment to benefit all sentient beings as much as the first 999 Buddhas benefited all sentient beings. So just in case you thought it was just big, it's not just big, it's beyond imagination. So one might ask, why would you do that? And here is where we meet the core of the practice of Chenrezig. Chenrezig makes that commitment to kind of in his tenure benefit all beings as much as the previous 999 Buddhas. And our tendency is to kind of measure that, get your ruler out and see like how big is this thing? Is it conceivable? Should I make that commitment or what? And you would be making a huge mistake to do that. And here's the exercise that I suggest. And actually, I'm not the first one to make the suggestion, but it's a practice. At first, we can say in the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, which is where we are kind of firmly planted at this moment, that compassion is both a practice and a result. It's both a practice and a result. In the simple way, as you can easily understand it, we practice compassion and there is a result of that. In this case, the number of beings that we are going to be committed to is so large that the result seems irrelevant. In fact, I'm not sure but what the number isn't so big because the result is irrelevant. The real important thing is the commitment. I will do it. Now the practice, which will make you want to do it, is you begin by first imagining having to benefit all beings as much as the first 999 Buddhas did. So the practice is think about that, ponder that for a little bit, And then make your very best effort. Kind of like try it on. Because if you say, I'm going to do it, your entire being will say, no, you're not. Think about something else while this is happening, is what we'll do. We don't want to think about something else. We want to make the commitment. So you can just kind of hedge your bet by saying, I'm just trying it on. I don't know if it fits yet. You try it on, really try it on. Like, I am really doing it. I am going to do that. And feel it. Just feel what that commitment would be like. In other words, make the largest imaginable and beyond imagination commitment that you could possibly make in this body at this time. And feel that, and then increase it just a little bit until it's just almost going to explode. At that point, we are talking about touching what we call bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the intention to recognize the awakening mind that we already have. We already have the awakening mind. We want to recognize it so that we can, and this is actually the only way that it could be done, so that we could offer the recognition to all sentient beings. Imagine, anything less will not work. And then sit with that now for just a few minutes. Allow yourself to feel that commitment fully. When you feel the intensity of that, take the force of that, the power of that commitment, and bring all of that to bear by looking at the experience that arises when you think about making, having that commitment. Look at the emotion, even if you will, the emotional reactivity, even the emotional reactivity against it. Take that power, that energy, and focus it like a laser on your experience. The experience which cannot be accessed by the intellect. While you're gazing at that experience, you may realize there's nothing there. At that point, you relax the mind, the body. Relax completely, mentally, physically. So that's the story of Conklin and the prediction of his future. And the reason I wanted to tell it is that this, in essence, is the commitment of Chenrezig. The numbers aside and all, Chenrezig's commitment is still the kind of profound aspiration and commitment of bodhicitta to do whatever is necessary to bring all sentient beings to recognize the nature of mind itself, and thereby be utterly, completely free of all suffering and its causes. That commitment itself is the act of compassion that makes all things possible. So now on page 12, if we can be so mundane, generating the visualization. Again, we imagine in front of us, extending to the very limits of space itself, a vast oceanic cloud I tend to think of it, the ocean is too small. The galaxy is too small. It's like beyond imagination, sentient beings extending to the very limits of space itself. And they range from nearly Buddhas to completely confused, miserable beings, and everything in between. And then we imagine. This is the generation phase. And some of you are familiar with more detail than I want to express in this moment. But the generation phase begins with the words on page 12, line 1, where it says, "On the crown of myself and sentient beings, pervasive as space." Sentient beings, pervasive as space, is a lotus and moon seat. So on your own head, there is a lotus flower that is kind of open on the top of your head, and on that lotus flower is a flat moon disk. Now, just to take the words right here, we'll later on, or maybe at another session, we'll fill in some of the details. On that moon disk is the letter Hri. If you know the letter Hri, then you imagine that letter Hri on that moon disk. If you don't know what it is, you can see it just below where it says, "On the crown of myself and sentient beings." Below that, kind of in the left side, there is the letter Hri, and you see an H-R-I, and just above that is the letter Hri. This Hri is called a seed syllable. A seed syllable, in a certain sense, can be understood like we understand any seed. Seeds contain all that's necessary for something to happen. And so here we're talking about a seed syllable that contains everything that's necessary. So we say, from the Hri, that is to say the Hri on this lotus and moon seat, appears the noble Chenrezig. Now again, for those of you who know the details, we're just putting them aside for the moment. From the Hri appears the noble Chenrezig. So the Hri disappears and Chenrezig appears on the crown of our heads. Chenrezig is clear, kind of translucent, white, radiating 5-colored light. The 5-colored lights reference the 5 Buddha families. So there are 5 Buddha families, and they each have a color: red, green, white, blue, and red. Yellow, sorry. And so those colors represent that, and in general, Chenrezig radiates those 5-colored lights. Moving down to the next page. Smiling and gazing with compassionate eyes, the first pair of his 4 hands, so now we know Chenrezig has 4 hands. Since he has 4 hands, he also has 4 arms. So smiling and gazing with compassionate eyes, the first pair of his 4 hands are joined together, like in our prayer mudra, with the hands together. The lower 2 hands of the 4 arms hold a crystal mala and a white lotus. Chenrezig is adorned with jewels and silk. He wears a deerskin upper garment. He's adorned with jewels and silk and wears a jewelskin upper garment. A deerskin upper garment. We can cover the meaning of that deerskin and the jewels and so on a little later this afternoon, possibly. So we turn the page to 14. His head ornament is Amitabha. So on Chenrezig's head is the Buddha Amitabha. So that's on your head, Chenrezig, and on Chenrezig's head, the Buddha Amitabha, and Amitabha is red. Chenrezig's two legs sit in the Vajra Asana, which is the method that the legs are folded together. And a stainless moon, that is to say a kind of pure white moon, vertically supports his back like the back of a seat. He is the embodiment, Chenrezig, is the embodiment and essence of all sources of refuge. So that may sound not so important. In and of itself, it may not sing to you. But if you take the steps that we just went through to come up to this point, we are getting to learn more about Chenrezig in the process. He is the embodiment and essence of all sources of refuge. That is to say, Chenrezig is the Buddha of the past, present, and future. Not the Buddha per se, but all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. He's the embodiment of all the great teachers, of all the previous Buddhas, the whole thing. Chenrezig is all of that. So we are in our imagining building a relationship with Chenrezig, building a relationship with the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, building a relationship with our own inherently pure, awakened mind, awakening mind. So one can see why the importance here is of generating a strong emotional relationship with these things, so that they are not just dry, crinkly, they're warm and moist, and we have a growing relationship with them. Now we come to the homage to Chenrezig. The homage to Chenrezig, which of course at this point you would want to recite an homage at this point. You would want to do almost anything that you could imagine that might continue that emotional connection, the sense of commitment, all of those things together. You would naturally want to not lose those things. So we say here, as students of the Dharma, practicing these things, trying them on, noble one, untainted by the mire, your form is luminous white. A perfect awakened one, that is Amitabha, adorns your head. With the eyes of compassion, you gaze upon beings. To Chenrezig we bow. Now, sometimes in the Dharma, with slight tongue-in-cheek, we do crazy things. We recite texts without knowing what we're doing, what we're thinking, or what the meaning is, and call that the music. as if we were sitting at a piano with music on sheet paper, but we would not call that the music. The music comes from the person who reads the sheet and puts the hands on the keys. We need to read this in a way which will sing to us. And so the way that we do this is we sing it. Miracle of miracles. So this is ordinarily repeated 3 times. I think maybe 7 times we could recite this together, thinking of all that we've just done in the practice leading up to this point, starting with reciting this once in English, and then 6 more times we'll recite it together, singing it. Does it work? The homage, yes, the homage.
Noble one, untainted by the mire,
your form is luminous white. A perfect awakened one adorns your head. With the eyes of compassion you gaze upon beings. To Chenrezig we bow.
Jo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo jo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo jowo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo jowo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo jowo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo jowo kunji magu kudoka zozan jeki ulajan tuje chenji drolazi chenrezi la chatsalo
Let's take another short break before we begin the next little section.